Welcome back to Foxfire Farmhouse. Thanks for trudging through the woods once again to land here on our doorstep. Come on in, have a seat.
Welcome, brave adventurer.
It's so brave that you've come past all the other podcasts in podcast land to be here to catch.
Set by many a podcast.
Here to catch the pods that we cast.
Yes.
Casting pods everywhere.
Yeah, it's our secret ability.
Yeah.
We can cast a pod, farther than any in the land.
We are epic podcasters.
Yeah. Tales will be told of our podcasting.
Well, this is the podcast, as they call them, of the Foxfire Farmhouse. And here we talk about all things storytelling and digital media. And so we are here today to talk about one of my favorite movies, perhaps what I would list as one of my top favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
A movie by John Michael McDonald called Calvary. So we're going to get around to that here in a little bit.
We will.
But before we do, we're going to talk about some movie news. So over the last couple weeks, there was a little event. Small event called the Super Bowl. Not many people watch that, but many people do watch the things that happen on the air between the Super Bowl happening. And so one of those things was a highly anticipated trailer for a highly anticipated show based on a highly valuable intellectual property.
Amazing.
Created by a highly valuable intellectual named J.R.R. Tolkien. Mm-hmm. And that is the Lord of the Rings. Yep. And Amazon is making a series called The Rings of Power. And they released a teaser to this before the Super Bowl that was really cool. That was all done with practical effects of metal going into wood. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And then the trailer came out. And Elijah said it was the best thing he's ever seen.
It's the best thing I've ever seen. I don't think anybody's ever done Tolkien right until now. I've been waiting for this day. Peter Jackson, get out of here.
They finally
get out of here.
Setting it right.
Yeah. I want feminists Galadriel climbing a cliff.
Heck
That's what I want to see.
Was that even Galadriel?
I think that was her.
Okay, man.
I think she was climbing a cliff in armor.
Man, I dig it.
Good for her.
Yeah. And then I want to see, I want to see her chopping orcs' heads off, right?
Doing backflips.
Isn't that what we're supposed to see?
That's exactly what I think Tolkien was going for.
I think that if Tolkien were to see this Galadriel, he would say, that's exactly what I was after.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What Tolkien would say.
Thank God he is not here.
We
apologize, Mr. Tolkien.
He didn't like the animated pick in it, at all.
I don't think I want to watch this just so that when I'm in heaven and I meet him, I'm not like, dude, I watched. I'm so sorry. I want to be able to say I did not.
Next in line, please.
Touch it. Of course, he'd be
Josh, you are done. There's a line in front of Tolkien. Lewis, they're just sitting there.
They'll be like, but you did watch Peter Jackson's, right? And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm banished to a purgatory of some sort.
Yeah. It's not quite hell. It's purgatory.
Yeah, right. It's the place where I have to go reread.
You need to reread.
I have to read the Silmarillion.
It's got good parts.
Yeah. So yeah, the trailer just doesn't look incredibly promising.
No, it doesn't. I think obviously there's the big parts of, I think they're missing some of the characterizations just by a long shot. They're far left of the target in terms of Galadriel and other characters. A lot of characters which you don't know yet. Or like most people, if you just watch the movies, you wouldn't know who really any of these characters are. Other than Galadriel is kind of like the touchstone for most people. Mm-hmm. But I think what they got going against it is it doesn't really look like a Lord of the Rings movie. That's what we rewatched it before we came into this. We wanted the fire.
The fire of our hatred.
The hate fire.
To burn in our bones.
Burn deep within us. But it looks like Game of Thrones in terms of coloring. It looks really dim and dark.
Well, except there are scenes that are bright and cheery, but the bright and cheery ends up looking like video game bright and cheery, not like a believable world. I
really like the lighting. That was one of the best parts of the Lord of the Rings series was and the art direction does look great in this too. I don't think they've really lost that too much, but I did really like the feel that the movie came with, in terms of like, this is like what a fantasy movie is, and it's defined every fantasy movie ever since, in terms of like what a workshops has done, and it made them.
Right.
And
I kind of think the costuming looks a little too clean, or like. So we'll see. We'll see what it actually ends up to be.
I hope to be wrong.
I really want to be wrong, and I want to love it. Mm-hmm. But what have we seen made in the modern era that is not so thick with ideology that it is just putrid? And so the things that are the best are usually those things that aren't trying to be ideological, or the things that are trying to be ideological and end up missing the mark because they just accidentally or purposefully were trying to be good art at the same time.
Yeah.
And in the end made something that was, great. So perhaps this is a big accident that's going to end up being amazing because it's an accident.
I really hope so. I've been wanting to be in Middle Earth, like film wise, for so long. But
so we'll see what happens. The Hobbit was disappointing, and this And then even in reading and listening to podcasts, I've come to think less of the movies than I used to. Not in terms of, I still love the movies and I'd still watch them anytime, but in terms of like, I begin to see where they are coming short of portraying what Tolkien was after.
Yeah.
And I think the more that's only prepped me to hate this series. And so we'll see how it goes.
Cool things.
Things I've been finding cool
in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I was struggling to think of one for this episode, and I was like, what have we been watching with the kids lately? And literally today, we watched Paddington, and I forgot how, like, I didn't forget. I love that movie. I love watching it because it's just a delightful little British flick that like warms the heart. It's not it's not harrowing. It's not emotionally taxing. You just sit there and you just enjoy it, and you sit there and eat a snack. And
it's so good.
Oh, this is so good. With a little tea and a marmalade sandwich.
And then life is okay.
Life's okay. Yeah, just close the blinds with a blanket. It's one of those movies that's like, it really gets that feeling of like a childhood book. And you're just like, this is a comfortable place. Mm-hmm. It's good. And not only that, it's technically excellent. It's
beautiful.
Just so well everythinged. Acting, the direction, the cinematography, the music. It's so good. Like this time I just noticed there's when they come in through the front door of the house, there's this big tree that goes up.
Yes.
I just realized that tree changes throughout the whole movie, depending upon the attitude of the house.
Yeah. It's pretty sweet.
And I pointed that out to my wife. I was like, that is so cool. Like, it's just little details.
It's a great movie.
That just make it so much fun. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Go check that out.
Check it out.
And Paddington 2, both of them.
Yeah, 5 stars for a kid's film. That's one of those ones that you can throw on the shelf and not have to worry about. Like
that should be on your movie shelf.
It should be.
Yep.
If not already.
Yep.
What about you? What are you finding?
So speaking of J.R.R. Tolkien, I a couple weeks ago recommended the book In the House of Tom Bombadil by C.R. Wiley. Yeah. And he referenced on fairy stories a lot. I had read it before and I decided to pick it up again. And so I brought it today, and I have a passage from it that I want to use as an example of how good it is. So he's kind of giving he's talking about fairy stories. And I think the way we would talk about it is fantasy. And so he's really trying to analyze what is a fairy story, what counts as one, what does not, what makes a good one, what makes a bad one.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff in here, and he goes a lot of different directions, and I'm still trying to sort it out myself. Even after my second time reading through it, there's a lot that I think I can still learn from it. So I'm probably going to go back through this a few times. But here's a line. He says, enchantment produces a secondary world into which both the designer and the spectator can enter, to the satisfaction of their senses while they are inside. But in its purity, it is artistic in desire and purpose. So that enchantment is when you watch a movie and you're like totally enraptured and you're in that world. Or if you're playing a video game like we talked about, or you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, whatever the thing is, there's a secondary world that we're not confused. We don't think that's the real world, but we enter into it and believe that world in that moment.
Yeah.
He differentiates that though from magic. So he says magic produces or pretends to produce an alteration in the primary world. So if enchantment produces a secondary world that you enter into, magic is still acting in this primary world, but attempting to alter it or do something else. And it does not matter By whom it is said to be practiced, whether it be fey or mortal, it remains distinct from the other two. It is not an art, but instead a technique. Its desire is power in this world, the domination of things and wills. And so just that there's all sorts of things like that he says in here that are just really fascinating. In this case, the difference between enchantment and magic, and talking about how then that fairy stories or fantasy tales are really aiming, any kind of artwork is aiming at creating a secondary world that is believable, into which we enter and learn something and come back from that quest in this fantasy world with something for our world. So it's just all sorts of really interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, I really need to read that book.
Yeah, I'm holding, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding the book. This is not the whole thing. So let me see. It's page 27 to here we go. Still there. 83. So it's like 60 pages worth of his essay on fairy stories. The rest of this book is just the rest of this one is just commentary actually on that book.
Who does the commentary?
The commentary is by Douglas Anderson and Verlyn Flieger. I have not read the commentary of this book. I bought this thinking it was just the fairy story, so I have not read the commentary. I cannot speak to it.
Okay.
But the tale Fairy Stories is here. It's also in other collections of his work. You can find that. But go check it out. It's really interesting. If you're interested in storytelling or just or you're just interested in fantasy and fairy stories themselves, go check it out.
And now, our feature presentation.
So the movie Calvary, made by John Michael McDonough and all the other artists and producers involved, is a movie that is not a Christian film.
No.
So lest you be distracted by the fact that it's about a priest
and the
title is Calvary, then just be warned from the get-go. This is not a Christian film, albeit going back to our definition of Christian film. I would say it's a very Christian film, but it's not the kind of Christian film that you're going to, take the family to and try to invite your unbelieving friends to go see.
Which is not a good idea for the traditional Christian films, but
anyway. But so it's a very mature film. But let's start with kind of a synopsis. So Elijah has just recently come off of watching it.
I literally watched it just before my 15-minute drive over here. I ended it and I was like,
fresh.
I'm out.
It's
super fresh
on his mind.
Yeah, it's okay. So I'm just gonna say it's a great movie, mature movie. So not meant for kids for sure.
Yeah, and the warnings on that. I mean, it's rated R.
The warnings are on the label.
Rated R. The warnings are there.
You can figure it out. But anyway, so synopsis of the story is basically the movie starts with the priest, and he's sitting in the confession booth. Brendan Gleeson plays the main character. Great actor. Love him.
Yeah,
love him in everything he's in, from Braveheart. Have you seen him in Braveheart yet? He's pretty good at Braveheart.
No, I have not seen him in Braveheart
Mad Eye
yet.
Moody and Harry Potter. He's just good at everything he puts his hand to. But anyway, he's sitting in the booth, and it seems to be late at night, and he's somebody walks into the other side of the confession booth, and obviously there's anonymity in confession booth, so you don't know who it is, but the person basically starts out by saying, like, I was abused by a Catholic priest growing up, and he gets explicit into the details of that. And basically for years, as from 7 years old up, I've been abused, and he's just very angry about it. And the priest is just like, I honestly don't know what to say to you. Like, that's horrible. I'm sorry. And like, do you want to do a formal complaint? Do you want to get the police involved? All these different things. And he just says, well, what good would that do? I mean, he's dead. And even if he were alive, he's a bad priest. So like, what is that going to accomplish? So what I think is that I'm going to kill a good priest, and you're that good priest. And let me think, I'm going to kill you next Sunday. And so we're going to come back to this, and we're going to meet me on the beach, and I'm going to shoot you. And you have the week to put everything in order. And he just walks out, and Brendan, the father's like, has nothing to say. And cause he's like, do you have anything to say? And he's like, I'll have something to say to you next week. So basically it takes off from there, and you have him doing his daily pastoral, although he's a priest at that time, but it's similar to what pastors do. And he does that throughout the week, and it goes day by day. And he sets things in order, does his daily rhythms, and do you want to tell him?
Yeah, so we'll spoil the whole thing for you. Not necessarily the whole thing. We'll try to hold some things back for you.
Yeah.
But so a week later, he goes through his week. A week later, he shows up on the beach, and he meets with this guy, and he gets shot.
And this is one of the members of his parish.
This is one of the members he's been dealing with throughout the week. One of the members that he's been pastoring.
You as the audience don't know who it is.
Yeah, so the audience doesn't know from the beginning. You don't know who it is because it doesn't show us in the booth. They do some things, some effects with the voice, so that the voice is not distinguishable. It's not.
They're all Irish.
They're all Irish. Yeah, right. This
takes place in Ireland.
So you can't really pick up on who it is. And so you're trying, throughout the week, you're trying to figure out who is it that is going to kill him? Who is it that confessed to this?
Yeah.
And then the father deals with everyone in his parish at different times. And so you don't know who it is. And there's always that undertone then of trying to kind of figure out who it is. And then you get to the beach at the end and the reveal happens. Here's who it is. He gives his final words and then he shoots the priest. And then you end up seeing the priests, all the people in the parish, and kind of where they are after the father's dead. Yeah. And so that's the story. So last week we had BioShock Infinite. And we had this massive, complicated,
multi-dimensional
trying to untangle. And perhaps you had no idea what that game is even about now. And that makes sense.
Yeah.
but this one is really the plot.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a plot per se in the same traditional sense.
Yeah.
So it's really starts with, I'm going to kill you. And a week later, the guy kills him. And you just kind of walk through that week with him. And so some of the things that happen throughout the week. One, his daughter returns from London. She's been there. She was dating a guy, broke up with him. Everything went really bad. She was highly depressed, tried to kill herself and didn't succeed. And now she's come back to be with her dad for a week. And so she shows up, and that's part of the interaction that he has. He's got another priest that works in the parish with him that he's dealing with. And that priest is a little bit... I don't know.
He's just unfit.
Yeah, he's unfit. He's unfit, and he's just kind of a
doesn't
distant,
know what he's doing.
Yeah, and so he's got to deal with him. He's got a member of his parish members of his parish who are committing adultery. He has a couple members doing cocaine. He's got one of them who runs a tavern that's being shut down because the bank, he's being foreclosed on because of the banks.
Yeah,
he's got another one who was a banker who made rich in the stock market crash of 2008.
Lost everything. Yeah.
Well, so he lost everything that matters.
Yeah.
He gained a lot of money.
Gained all the money, yeah.
And so his wife and kids left him. His housemaid left him. Everyone has left him, but he is still stuck on himself.
She's even from Ecuador. I didn't think that she had anywhere to go, but she left too.
He's lonely and on his own. Let me see. What other kind of parish members does he have?
They're pretty well. There's a writer on an island.
Yeah. There's a writer on an island that he keeps in touch with. And then in the middle of the story, there is a woman whose husband, her and her husband get in a car accident, and the husband is basically on life support. He's going to die.
Yeah.
And so he administers last rites to the husband, and then
prays
with her
on the first day too.
Yeah. The whole thing starts with him serving communion after the confession scene. And so he administers last rites. He talks to this woman and kind of comforts her, tries to console her with the loss of her husband. And then his church gets burned down halfway through. That's one of the things that happens.
As he gets closer to that day.
Yeah, I think that's on Thursday that it happens. So then I believe it was Friday or maybe even Saturday when he decides to leave. And so he heads to Dublin, but then he meets...
it was Friday, yeah.
So then he meets that lady again, and
she has a very strong faith, yeah.
Yeah, and so she kind of encourages him, not indirectly, she doesn't realize how much she's encouraging him, but indirectly encourages him by her testimony of faith in the midst of a hard time.
Yeah.
So then he goes back to the village where he lives, and ends up showing up on the beach. And there's his bishop, I guess, or someone he's accountable to. Yeah, he talks to. So there's these different cast of characters, and you're just walking throughout. Yeah,
Archbishop. I think
you're just kind of hanging out with the father as he ministers throughout the week.
Just goes and makes visits with people, hears about these things going on in his congregation, and just checking up on people and trying to give them God's word and trying to encourage them.
Yeah. So now
ultimately listen to them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of listening.
There's a couple of things about the film. First of all, like Elijah said, it's a very mature film. So it's got a lot of mature themes. And it's the kind of thing that is probably even, I mean, it's uncomfortable for anyone to watch. It's not, it's just uncomfortable because he's dealing with some really hard things. I think there are some missteps in it in terms of the kind of counsel he gives, but I don't think it's missteps for the film in the sense that, like, if I was counseling that many people over the course of that time, it would make sense too that the father's not going to have all the wisdom to be able, so that he's going to give bad counsel. So I don't know that it's a distractor to the film. No. Just you're not supposed to take the father as like the epitome of perfection that you're supposed to follow, right?
Like should be in every aspect, because he messes up a lot, and you see his own failings. Like he had an issue with drinking, and like one of his last days, he goes out and just drinks way too much, gets drunk, and gets into a fight in a bar. And
he's weighed down by the pressures. I think one of the tipping points for him going back to drinking, because he'd been apparently off alcohol for a long time. One of the things that's a tipping point is he's talking to this little girl on the road, and she's not with her parents, and they're just walking along the road, and he's kind of having some banter with her, and it's a really sweet exchange. And then the father pulls up in the car and is just
up
ticked off. Thinking the worst, because of course there's like the sex abuse scandals, and so he's just ticked off at the priest. And the priest would be talking to his daughter, and the priest has done nothing wrong. And so Father James is his name. He then goes back and he gets a drink, and then the medical examiner, who
the atheist doctor,
who's like an atheist doctor.
I like how they portrayed him, because he's like, he knows who he is to the priest. It's like, my part is like the atheist cliched. What do you say? It's one part humanity,
one part humanism,
and then 9 parts gallows humor. He's like, I wonder how it would be to play your character. But
so it's really it's really good writing there. But he tells him a story about a kid who suffered horribly, and just to kind of rile him up, and it does. And so eventually he keeps drinking. Finally, the bartender says, "Nope, you're done." And then he pulls out a gun and just shoots up the bar. And just he's lost control. And then the guy beats him up. And so he's not a good priest in that sense. Like, in one sense, he is a good priest. The other sense, he's not sinless by any means. And then he's struggling with his own commitment to the church by wanting to leave and get out of town so that he doesn't die. Right. So you've got all these kinds of the swirling emotions. And so it's a mature film. Also, it's a mature film in that it's not really plot heavy. So you've got to pay attention and just watch and sit with the film and let the film do its work.
It's mature in like the fact that I think you have to be mature in taking it in to appreciate the film. I think you have to have lived life. Like, I think the tone of the film is real. I think that it's a very real film in terms of how it portrays who he is and all the characterizations of everybody in his congregation. The dialogue's meant to be very real. And just even in how people live these sinful lives, and it doesn't glorify them. No. And it doesn't romanticize and show this horrid picture of it, but it just shows it real. Like, they're not living their best life, but I mean, it just shows all these people being people. And
you lying to themselves. And you as an audience are privy to the fact that they're lying to themselves.
And you can see that the pastor sees that too. That the father's like, he's even like with the lady who's committing adultery, he's just looking at her like, what are you doing? Like, he's struggling to figure out like how to get at her heart. Like, and he time and time again just
he has a moment where he talks to her where he kind of gets to her heart, or you see that she knows
she
she's
quotes
living
scripture
a lie.
to him.
And she realizes, she knows that this is not.
She quotes the lilies of the field and that they toil. Like, she knows that this is going to go away and it's going to go to nothing, is basically what she's saying to him.
But she's not willing to turn away from it. She's not willing to repent. And it's that kind of like, okay, she knows she's lying to herself. So it just really does a good job portraying like the human condition on all fronts, the human condition of faith, the human condition of sin and rebellion. I mean, it's really fascinating. And I love the movie so much because I love sitting in that world and thinking through these things.
Yeah.
And because I find that movies like this, there's a book by Paul Schrader called The Transcendental Style in Film, and he examines Hiro Aju and I forget the other two filmmakers off the top of my head that he examines, but two other one was a French New Wave filmmaker, and then another one was I'm losing it now. Maybe a German filmmaker.
Yeah.
Anyway, 3 different filmmakers of different times, and he talks about what he calls the transcendental style, which just is. It's often called slow cinema. So Paul Schrader directed a movie called First Reformed about another priest, and it was a weird one with Ethan Hawke. And it's this kind of style that is slow and just lets you sit with these things, because when you sit with them, it engages you in a way that like, okay, what am I supposed to be learning here? Like, it's not spoon feeding this to you.
That's exactly what was wrong with the Eternals, is they tried that style and it makes you think. It leaves room for you to think.
Yeah, and then they didn't give you
but there was nothing there.
There was nothing to think about.
Yeah. This one, like, there's so much there. There's so much realness. There's so much content that you can chew on, but that gives you that time. But sorry, continue.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I like, because of that, I like sitting in this world and thinking about it. And so every time I come back to it, it can reward the thinking. It can reward the multiple viewings, because it's not all about who did it, who's going to kill the father.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, it's like a who will do it, not a who done it. It's like, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
And so
that's the hook. That's the hook to get you to watch it, but that's not what the movie's about.
And it's like it's almost a bait and switch. And really, by the time I'm like on day 2 or 3,
you forget. I'm
not even thinking about the fact that one of these people is going to be a killer. I'm really just like, oh man, that guy's a jerk, or you know, this woman needs to get her act together, or you know, I'm just enthralled in the story, and then that's you know, I'm enjoying the exchange between father and daughter, and like, you know, I'm enjoying these things so much that I just want to, I don't mind hanging out.
Yeah.
And then I think that so I found it. I just find it incredibly moving, and that in the end, it's a real picture of what it looks like to exercise faith and to follow Jesus. Yeah.
And also just, it gives you that glimpse into the pastoral kind of realm where you get to see what real ministry looks like. Real ministry is not like, I think a lot of us have this idea of like, especially anybody who's like thought of becoming a pastor, like early on, usually it's preaching that kind of gets you going like, I want to do what he's doing right now. But what you don't see is all of the other hours of that day, of that Sunday, and of every other day of the week where he's on call 24/7. Like some people get the idea that, oh, it must be nice to have your dad or your husband home, but that's not the reality. If you actually get to know pastors and their families, it's a high stress job where they're having to get those calls, where they get the calls about just the worst of humanity, the worst of sin. They deal with that, and they're sticking their hands in that world, like all day, and they see it, and it wears on pastors. We've seen pastors burn out. We've seen pastors just really need help, and so it kind of also gives you that idea and shows you what it's like, kind of what it's like for that pastor who's kind of just doing it on his own, kind of doesn't have anybody really encouraging him. And it shows that need for like congregations to come around their pastor and to share the load, to kind of share one another's burdens, like we're told to. Like, and so I think that for me, that was like one of the hardest hitting things about it, and that I appreciated about it was just showing, it's uncomfortable, but this is what pastors have to do every day. Like we get to live our lives and do these things, but pastor, like when do you call your pastor? When it's just the worst times in the world. Everything is falling apart. Yeah. You cannot fix it on your own. Your friends cannot fix it. Literally, they're like the last call. And so it just does a great job of depicting that, and depicting that reality, and
depicting so many different kinds of conditions. Like, so the man who has lost everything, but he's super rich, he is a really interesting guy because he comes in after the church has been burned down and he wants to make a donation. He'd already kind of hinted at a donation before, but when the father showed up at the house, he was kind of drunk. And so he didn't donate, but now he wants to donate. And he's really trying to make penance with his money. And the father sees right through this and calls him out on it and says, all right, he was going to give 20,000 to the church. And the other priest is like really impressed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And the father tells him, well, how about you write 50,000? And the guy says, oh, it means nothing to me. He's like, I know it doesn't. Right? Like he's calling him out and making him give way more because this doesn't matter. The money doesn't matter. It's not a loss to you. You're not feeling it. Like you're like, there is nothing about this that is, the father is unwilling to let the man lie to himself. And the father is going to tell the truth to that person in the face of their lie, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it feels harsh, he's going to deal with them. And then in the end, that guy comes around to a genuine repentance. Just before the end, before the father goes down to the beach. And it's just, I think there's just so much about that kind of thing that is so real that it's like, it's just worth watching to like think through what would it look like to tell the truth to someone in a way that really helps them and to hold to it, even though that person now alienates you know.
It shows like what true like strength and meekness is. Like the strength is not like when he exercises physical strength, when like there's times like that you're like, oh, like as a man, you're like, you just like, our first instinct is violence. Like you just want to like get a hold of these guys and be like, you're doing something horrible. You're committing adultery. Like, I just want to grab a hold of you and like shake it out of you, but you can't. And so he shows that strength of where he is not, he's like unbending and just in his presence and in his words. And he even gets things flicked out. He gets the cigarette flicked at him and he stands there and takes it and has that strength under control, which is meekness and shows aspects of Christ that all of us should have, but that those who are in leadership definitely need to have. And I don't think the filmmakers had this in mind. So I'm gonna here's my thesis about the film upon multiple viewings. I don't know that they had this in mind. No. And I've watched behind the scenes about the movie just to try to see if this was intentional, because once I saw it, it seems to make enough sense to me that it was hard to believe that someone wouldn't include it. But here we go. So here's my read on the film, that Father James is following in the footsteps of Jesus, right? So that's obvious. That's not hard. But like, think about this. This is his Passion Week, right? Like this is the week before his death. He's told, so in the beginning we start, you're going to die. Passion Week. In the middle of, so everyone's against him, right? Everyone they don't listen to him. They are turning away from him and what he has to say. They persecute him, burn down his church, and so on. He has his Gethsemane moment. Father James has a Gethsemane moment where he goes, where he's struggling with bearing the weight of dying, right? Like, so in the same way that Jesus struggled with that. But who comes to him in the moments where he is most struggling? And that is an angel in the form of, I think her name is Louisa. Or, his daughter?
No, the woman who has the strong faith. I forget her name.
So she's French or Italian.
She's Italian. So she comes, she comes to him in a way that is like the angels ministering to Jesus when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. So you've got that kind of picture. And then in the end, when he dies, he literally dies between two criminals. So he's got one criminal who's the thief, who's the banker, who's repentant. So one who is repentant, one who carries through with the murder. So I mean, literally in the movie, you've got these two people side by side of him when he dies.
Well, it opens with that quote from Augustine with the on one hand,
exactly right.
One of the thieves repented and saw glory, and on the other hand, or don't presume.
Don't presume, because one of the thieves
is like, be assured one of the thieves repented and was saved, but don't presume, because one of the thieves was damned.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so you end up with him in between two criminals, and one is repentant and one is not. And then the whole movie ends So his daughter Fiona, we need to back up to kind of fill in Fiona's story, because Fiona comes, she's talking to her dad. Her dad, she's kind of bitter against him a little bit because when her mother died, he was trying to get through all that. Of course, he's got his daughter, and the way she puts it is she lost 2 parents for the price of one. Her mother died of cancer, and then her father joined the priesthood after that. And so she ends up losing both of her parents. She doesn't have them around. He was pursuing a vocation. She felt cheated. And so she deals with this a little bit when she's with him, and they kind of come around to getting right. Right before he goes down to the beach, he calls her and talks to her. And she says something about committing a sin of omission. Anyway, he says, I think there's too much talk about sin and not enough about virtue. And so then she asked, what's number 1 of your virtue list? And he said, I think forgiveness is highly underrated. And so kind of putting a little pinpoint on the idea that forgiveness is what is here, because the father is about to go and take an unnecessary killing and is by doing that forgiving the man who is killing him. Yeah. Right. So in the same way that Christ stands on the cross and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Father James is about to come down to the beach and forgive the man who's killing the man who's going to kill him by just being present and letting him kill him. Yeah. And then in the very end, the last scene that always moves me so much is that, so you've got, after the father dies, then you see all of the people in the parish and they're all kind of just going on with their lives and with their sin as usual. But then you get to the murderer, and he's in prison, and Fiona is there going to visit him. And this is right on the end of him telling her, the last thing he said to her was that forgiveness is an underrated virtue. And now she's sitting there across from him, and she's got the phone in her hand, waiting for him he picks up the phone, and she puts the phone to her ear, then ready to talk to him. And then a tear falls down her cheek, and then the movie ends. Right. So leaving us to wonder what happens. Yeah. But the implication being that she is about to extend forgiveness. She's not there with anger in her eyes to shout at this man, but she's there as a voice of love and compassion, extending the care of her father to those who hate her father, the man who hated her father and killed her father. Right. So just like so many beautiful pictures of what Jesus calls us to do, and all in its brokenness, right? Like, so this isn't trying to show us Christ and show us the perfect man. This is showing us what happens when a man is shaped by Christ and follows him. Yeah. And that's just what I want to be. And so there's things to learn from Father James that we shouldn't be, and then there's things we should learn and copy. Yeah. And it's the kind of movie that gives plenty of food for thought. It's a mature movie. It's not. This isn't a Marvel hero movie. No. This isn't your standard drama. It's not a romance. It's a gritty mystery, real movie. It's probably in a different vein than most movies that you watch. Yeah. But it is well worth your time, and one of my favorite movies of all time. So yeah. 5 stars. Yep. That's Calvary by John Michael McDonough. Go check it out. You can find it everywhere where movies are found. Yeah. So. Well, I think we've done it. I think we've cast another pod. We did it. Yep, that pod is now cast. Cast. Yep, it's been cast. So if you caught the pod, then let us know what you thought about it. Send us a message. It's a cool looking pod. And send us an electronic mail. Yes. On the computers, on the interwebs. Throw us some email back. Yeah. Through the ether. Send it back. Send it back through the wireless, the cloud. Send us a message by cloud. Yes. Yep. This smoke signals, basically. Just send us a smoke signal about what you thought of Foxfire. Yeah. If you've watched the movie Calvary, let us know what you think. Yeah. And if you've got other movies like that you want to recommend to us, I'm always down for that that genre of movie. So, yep, indeed. Real good. Well, this has been another episode of Foxfire Farmhouse. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Yeah, it's been good. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.